All right, here comes some challenge word problems for adding and subtracting mixed numbers with regrouping. Tons of things to think about here, guys. Lots of careful reading on these word problems, but also on that adding and subtracting. We're going to be regrouping now. We're going to be decomposing those numbers, and it's going to get pretty challenging, but here's some examples we can work through. All right. Sadie skated for 6 9/12 hours last month and 1 8/12 hours this month. How many hours did she skate in all? Well, we know from attacking a word problem, we're looking for words that tell us, are we adding or subtracting? And right away, I can see in all. And we know in all is an addition word. So I'm going to highlight that word. I'm going to put an addition sign by that. In all, in total, we are going to add these two together. So let's get Sadie's information down. 6 9/12 and 1 8/12. And we're going to add these two mixed numbers. Remember, please, we had the whole numbers first and the fractions next. So 9/12 and 8/12 is 17/12. Now here's where we have a little problem. We've got to do a little decomposing of this improper fraction, and then it becomes, as we decompose it, you'll see we'll get another whole number here. So how do you decompose that number? I'm going to pull out one whole, which is 12/12. Remember, the numerator and denominator make that one whole if they're the same. I'm going to keep that denominator the same. That's how I got the 12/12. And then I need to think, what do I need to add to that to create this 17/12? Well, 5 more 12s make that, these two together make up that 17/12. So now I know that 12/12 here is really one whole more. I had 7, so now I've got 8 whole, and this is kind of my remainder, if you will, my fraction to go along with that whole, and that's 5/12. So 8 whole and 5/12. All right, another word problem I want to look at here. Wyatt works at Fifth Street Deli. Before the deli opened today, he chopped 10 3/8 pounds of white onions and 7 6/8 pounds of red onions. How many pounds of onions did he chop in all? Again, step 1, find those words. Find those math words that tell me what I'm going to do. Add, subtract, and we just saw the words in all in the last problem. This has a 2. That means we are adding the sum, the total in all. All right, so now we've got his 10 3/8 pounds of white onion and 7 6/8 pounds of red onion. And we're going to add those together. Start with those whole numbers, and we'll be at 17. Add those fractions, and we're at 9/8. And again, you'll see that we've got this improper fraction here, and we've got to simplify it. I'm going to decompose that again and see what I can pull out of there. Here's 1 whole and 1/8 more, make up that 9/8. That 1 whole, or 8/8, will bump that 17 up to 18 whole, and this 1/8 goes right with it. Let's look at another example here. Judith mailed a letter on Monday morning. The letter traveled 8 2/3 mile on Monday. It traveled 9 2/3 mile on Tuesday, reaching its destination on Tuesday afternoon. How far did Judith's letter travel in all? Again, looking for those words that tell us if we're adding or subtracting. Here it is again. I bet you're going to see it a lot today. In all, total. Those mean add. So we're going to add this distance the letter traveled. 8 2/3 and 9 2/3. Adding those whole numbers first. We're going to have 17 for our whole number, adding those fractions second, 4/3. Again, another improper fraction here with our whole number, so we're going to have to decompose. 3/3 is the 1 whole I'm going to pull out of that. 1/3 more makes up that 4/3. So here's my 17 whole plus 1 more. That's going to give me 18. I gotta shrink this a little bit because I'm running out of space. That's going to give me 18 for my whole number and 1/3. So this 17 plus 1 more is 18, and what's left after I decompose that 4/3 is this 1/3. All right. Javier poured 1 2/3 gallons of water into a bucket. Later he added 1 2/3 more. How much water is in this bucket now? What word tells me if I'm going to add or subtract? Well, right here, the word more. And when they say the word more, they are adding on this one. So we've got to take 1 2/3 and add 1 2/3 more. Starting again with that whole number, 1 plus 1 is 2, and then adding those fractions, and you'll see we get another improper fraction here. I'm going to decompose it, break it down into pieces. 3/3 and 1/3 make up that 4/3. This 1 whole right here plus these 2 whole right there make a total of 3 whole and 1/3. Let's look at this next example here. Last year, Kyle grew 4 1/10 inch, and his brother grew 2 5/10 inch. How much more did Kyle grow than his brother? Well, in this case, when they're asking how much more, it's not an addition problem, it's a subtraction problem. Kyle was taller. How much taller? You have to find the difference there. So we've got to do a subtraction here. We've got Kyle's 4 1/10, and we've got to subtract 2 5/10. That's how much his brother grew. And here's where we have to be careful. I can subtract the whole numbers, but look at those fractions. I can't do 1/10 minus 5/10. I don't have a big enough numerator here. And this is when I'm going to have to regroup that 4 1/10. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that. First off, to make this fraction larger, I need to take one of these whole numbers. So I'm going to break that 4 whole into 3 whole, and then I need to make that last whole a fraction that works with 1/10, and I'm going to make it 10/10. Because I know when the numerator and denominator are the same, it's 1 whole, and I want it to have the same denominator as that 1/10. So all I'm doing is taking one of these 4, changing it into a fraction, leaving the other 3 whole there. And now I'm going to put these fractions together. I'm going to put 10/10 and 1/10 together. And 10/10 and 1/10 is 11/10. And I still have my 3 whole. So I broke this 4 down, and I put it back together with this 1/10, and I've got 3 11/10. Now I can subtract 2 5/10. Again, starting with that whole number, 3 minus 2 is 1, and then hitting that fraction, 11/10 minus 5/10 is 6/10. Let's take a look at a couple more. All right. While making dessert for a bake sale, Reagan used 3 1/3 scoop of brown sugar as well as 1 2/3 scoop of white sugar. How much more brown sugar did Reagan use? So there they are using that how much more, and that means we've got to subtract. So she has more brown sugar. How much more? You're going to have to find the difference. So let's see here. We've got 3 1/3 brown sugar and 1 2/3 white sugar, and we need to subtract those to see how much more brown sugar we use. Once we write that down, again, we see the whole numbers we can subtract, but it's the fractions that make it difficult. If I only have 1/3, I can't take 2/3 away. I have to make this a bigger fraction with a bigger numerator, so I'm going to have to use something from these 3 whole. I'm going to break it down into 2 whole, and that next whole that we are taking out of it is going to become a fraction, 3/3. And remember, I picked thirds because I want the denominators to be the same for this next step when I put them back together. So now it's going to be 2 whole, and 3/3 plus 1/3 is 4/3. Now, shrink this a little bit. Now I can subtract that 1 whole and 2/3. I'm going to get the whole number first. I'm going to get the fraction, 4/3 minus 2/3, next, and we're all set. One last one to look at. Let's take a peek. Abdul made cookies. He used 4 1/3 cup of flour and 1 2/3 cup of sugar. How much more flour than sugar did he use? And hear those words again, how much more? Another subtraction problem. So let's start here with his flour, 4 1/3, and his sugar, 1 2/3. And if we have to subtract, you can see we can't do the fraction, so we're going to have to borrow, regroup from this 4 whole, and make this fraction bigger. So that would leave us with 3 whole and 3/3. And then we're going to put these 2 fractions together. 3/3 and 1/3 makes that 4/3 and 3 whole. Right here, put the fractions together. And then we're going to subtract 1 whole and 2/3. Once we subtract those whole numbers first, 3 minus 1 is 2. And then those fractions, 4/3 minus 2/3 is 2/3. I know this is some challenging stuff, but I know you can do it too. Think about what you're doing. Make sure if it's addition that you simplify. If it's subtraction that you might have to borrow or regroup, whatever, decompose, whatever vocabulary you want to use for it. And really just think through what you're doing. I know you can do it. Good luck, guys.